Welcome to a wide open space. Here, our focus is strengthening our faith, cultivating ourselves, and creating lives that we love. I'm your host, Reverend Dr. Nichelle Guidry Stewart. Well, hello, my beautiful friends, my beautiful sisters. Welcome back. Last week, we talked about the sacred work of naming your desires, getting radically honest about what you actually want so that you can begin partnering with God to create it. I hope you've been working on that desire inventory and listening for how God wants to collaborate with you in this season. Today, we're going to continue in this journey of transformation because once you have named what you want, you have to do the courageous work of owning your story, all of it. The beautiful parts, the broken parts, the victories and the wounds, the choices that you're proud of, and the ones you wish that you could take back. Yes, today we are talking about owning your story as the pathway to writing a new one, or at least to beginning to pen a new chapter. Because when we don't own our stories, we often replay them endlessly, placing blame on ourselves and others for events that happened a long time ago. We can't make meaning of our stories as long as we continue to be oppressed by them. But as my spiritual muse, the great Susan L. Taylor, teaches us, our stories are our gifts to the world. I firmly believe that our story is our power. It is critical to accessing and activating our personal power. And when we own our stories, we become the author, not the victim in the story. We take responsibility for our actions. We learn from the events that we have encountered and we have endured. And then we can get to the gracious work of writing new ones. So for today's devotional, join me in Luke chapter 8, 43 through 48, where we meet a very, very, very beloved woman. And I want to ground us in this scripture in Luke chapter 8, because here we encounter a woman who had been bleeding for 12 years. She had spent all her money on physicians, and yet her condition persisted. And according to the law at that time and in that context, this condition made her ceremonially, quote, unclean. She couldn't touch anyone. She couldn't enter into the temple or any public space for that matter, and was essentially socially dead to the community that she probably desperately needed. But one day, this woman heard that Jesus was coming through town, and she made a decision. She pressed her way through the crowd, and you know how the story goes. She touched the hem of his garment, believing that if she could just touch him, or even touch something that was touching him, that she could get her healing. And you know the story. Immediately, her bleeding stopped. Now, here's where her story gets really interesting. Jesus could have let her just slip away into the crowd quietly. She'd already gotten what she came for, that healing, but instead of either one of them letting the moment go, Jesus stops and asks, "Who touched me?" And the disciples think that he's lost his mind because there's a crowd pressing in on him from all sides. But the word says that Jesus knew that power had gone out from him. And here's the part of the story that moves me the most, and it's often overlooked. Luke 8:47 says that the woman realized that she could not remain hidden. She came trembling and falling down before Jesus. She declared in the presence of all of the people just why she had touched him and how she had been immediately healed. Y'all, this woman could have stayed hidden. She was healed, mission accomplished, but something within compelled her to step forward, to tell the truth, trembling in the presence of the public. In this moment, she shattered her shame and she broke social protocol to declare her journey from isolation to healing. She owned her story of 12 years of suffering, her story of desperate faith, and her story of that divine encounter. And in doing so, she transformed from someone defined by her condition to someone empowered by the words of her testimony. And in this meditation portion today, I want to talk about moving from victim to author. There's something so revolutionary about this woman's choice to declare her story in the midst of the public. For 12 years, she had been defined by what was happening to her. But in that moment of healing and declaration, she became the author of what was happening through her. And this is what it means to own your story. It's the only way to begin writing a new one. When we don't own our stories, we stay stuck in victim mode, replaying the same patterns, carrying the same wounds, giving our power away to people and situations that are long gone in our past. But when we claim ownership of our stories, and when we claim authorship of our stories, we can extract the lessons, honor the growth, and deliberately write the next chapter. Now, let me share something deeply personal with you about my own journey of learning to own my story. I became the dean of the chapel at Spelman College after 2 very difficult traumas in my work life. Looking back, I may have believed in my youthful naivete and even my youthful arrogance that I was immune or somehow protected from vocational trauma because I was so gifted. But I have had to own that this was never the case. Here's the truth that I have since wrestled with. We work in flawed institutions with flawed human beings. And unfortunately, I, like many Black women, I would even venture to say most Black women, are treated unfairly and even horrifically on the job. One of the events that I experienced was somewhat public, and several people in my field even suggested to me that it would be hard, if not impossible, for me to find a job after that. But when I got my position as the dean of chapel at Spelman, I knew that it was by God's grace, and that if God did open that door for me, I would need to walk through that door with confidence and holy boldness. And I saw this opportunity as God providing me a blank page to begin authoring a new chapter in my career, my ministry, and my purpose. Of course, getting that job didn't change or negate the pain of those experiences, but it called to my attention how often I was replaying those hard stories. One day, I just realized that constantly remembering and constantly reiterating was just not helpful to me. It didn't push me forward. And so I had to begin working on owning my story. I had to come to realize that while those events were preventable and wrong, it would be up to me to learn the lesson that was mine to learn from these events, and to do the healing work around telling myself this story in a more life-giving and self-gracious way. And this is when, friends, I started owning my story. And for me, this looked like sitting with the story long enough and sitting with it intentionally enough to actually learn from it. I had to focus on how I showed up and the choices I made instead of what others did to me. I couldn't control anyone else. I couldn't then, and I can't now. But seeing these experiences as opportunities to grow, to learn, and even to level up helped me to own the story that once killed me. Beginning this process of owning this part of my story helped me to walk in a renewed state of heart and a renewed state of mind so that I could fully show up in my new season. I learned over time that this healing and owning of my story wasn't just about my job. This was about another chance, a new direction, a new trajectory, and a new chapter in the story that is my life. And in addition to the self work and the inner work, let me just pause here to shout out my therapist, to shout out the coaching and the mastermind that I joined around this time. Let me shout out my friends. Let me shout out my family who saw me through those tears, who heard me in my cussing fits, and who helped me to work my way through it and ultimately to heal and to own the story. And let me also be transparent and say that this is an ongoing work. This is an ongoing work. And I also want to be clear, sisters, and I want to be clear with you, my friends, that owning your story is not about letting anybody off the hook about how they treated you in the story. Ultimately, owning your story is really about releasing the hook entirely. Your business, my business, our business is what is right in front of us, not what is behind us. This is about forgiveness of others just as much as it is about forgiveness of self. It's about naming where we could have showed up differently and making the changes to do that moving forward. And once again, I don't claim that this is easy. And I definitely don't claim that this is linear. Once again, it is hard and it is ongoing. But as hard and as ongoing as this work is, when we own our stories, when we extract the meaning, honor the growth, and refuse to let our past define our future, we step into our power as authors of our own lives. Like the woman who bled for those 12 years, we can choose to declare our stories not as sources of shame, but as testimonies to God's faithfulness and testimonies to our own resilience. So for the exercise for this episode, I want you to do what's called the story audit. This practice is designed to help you practice owning one piece of your story so that you can move forward with greater power and peace. Think of one experience from your past that still has an emotional charge for you, something that still makes you feel angry, hurt, or stuck whenever you think about it. It doesn't have to be the biggest or most traumatic thing that has happened to you. Just something that you find yourself replaying and that still, when you get really honest with yourself, it still affects how you show up in the world. Now, I want you to write about this experience from 3 different perspectives. And it might be helpful here for you to pull out your journal and hit pause really quick. First, I want you to write about this experience as a victim story. Start with, this happened to me, and let yourself feel all the ways you were wronged, hurt, or treated unfairly. Do not edit these parts out. Just let it out on the paper. Second, I want you to write it as a survivor story. Start with, I survived this by, and focus on your strength, your resilience, and the ways you made it through. Honor your courage. And finally, I want you to write it as an author story. Start with, I learned from this, that, and focus on the lessons, the growth, and the wisdom you gained, the wisdom you earned from this experience. What did this experience teach you about yourself, about others, about your industry, about relationships, and about life in general? How did it contribute to who you've become today? And after you've written all 3 versions, I want you to ask yourself these questions. 1, where could I have shown up differently? 2, what is mine to own in this story? 3, what lessons are mine to learn? 4, how can this story serve my growth instead of my grievance? And finally, and most importantly, what new chapter do I want to write moving forward? Remember, y'all, owning your story doesn't mean excusing harmful behavior or pretending that it didn't matter. It means refusing to let other people's actions continue to have power over your present and your future. The goal isn't to erase the pain or to pretend that it was all good. The goal, rather, is to transform your relationship to your story so that it becomes a source of power instead of a source of pain. The goal is to take back the power and the responsibility that you have to write the next chapter with grace, authenticity, and with the support of God and the entire spiritual realm cheering you on. Sisters and friends, your stories matter. All of them. The beautiful ones, the broken ones, the victories, and the wounds. But you get to decide whether those stories define you or refine you. You get to choose whether you remain the victim of your circumstances or become the author of your own transformation. Like the woman who had been healed by Jesus after 12 years of constant blood flow, you have the power to step forward, to tell your truth, even if you are trembling, and to declare how God has brought you through all that you have come through. You have the power to own your story and use it as a stepping stone to the next chapter that God is writing in and with and through your life. Next week, we'll be talking about sacred self-management and what it means to make and to keep some promises to yourself as you journey to and through your own wide open space. Until that time, I want you to do that story audit. Practice that sacred work of owning your narrative. And remember, you are not defined by what happened to you. You are empowered by how you choose to grow through it. Thank you for joining me in this wide open space. If this episode blessed you, please share it with the sister who needs it. Subscribe, rate, and review to help other listeners find us. And as you go, may you walk boldly in your calling and flourish in the wide open space God has prepared just for you. Be blessed, be bold, and be beautifully you.